Thanks for joining us. This is part 5 in the 6-part series of Your Money, Your Goals training for extension educators. Shout out to Samantha Barker and Andrea Price, our tech support Zoom guru team, and welcome again to Jill Wheeler and Cassie Russell, our resident experts from CFPB, who are going to be teaching us more about your money, your goals today. And also, hi, Jesse Ketterman from our Financial Security for All community of practice, who's going to be talking about how he's used these wonderful resources in his financial management programming that he does in his area. So I'll turn it over to Jill and Cassie.
Thank you so much. Great. And I know some of you are joining us after missing the last session. So there will be an email that'll be sent out after the videos are recorded. So you'll be able to get caught up on what you missed, no problem. So today we're really excited to talk about consumer protection. We're going to talk about, what is consumer protection, some things related to specific financial products or services, and then we will talk about identity theft, sort of protecting your money generally. And we're really excited to be back with you all today. You have probably heard this by now, but just a reminder that Jill and I are making this presentation on behalf of the Bureau, but nothing is legal interpretation, guidance, or advice. The views we share are our own and may not fully reflect the views of the Bureau. If we talk about third-party resources like links to third-party sites, it doesn't constitute an endorsement, and there are many products, services, or places to get information that might meet your needs. So today we're going to talk about some tools in the Financial Empowerment Toolkit, some tools on the website, some tools in the booklets. And today we will also show a tool from Focus on People with Disabilities, which is one of the companion guides. So we want to hear from you. And before we talk about what consumer protection is, tell us your name in the chat and where you're located. Some folks have already done that, which is great. But tell us about what consumer protection topics come up most in your work. What are things that folks that you work with have questions on, or things that you've seen, trends you've noticed in your area? And while you share that in the chat, when the Bureau talks about consumer protection, we mean that money is protected from bad actors in the marketplace who don't follow the laws or rules, that prices, risks, and terms are clear upfront so that you have the information you need to actually select a service that meets your needs, and that if laws are broken, a consumer can exercise their legal rights. Great. So it seems like identity theft, building credit for older youth, and staying safe from scams for elders. Yeah, absolutely. And we talked about credit building yesterday, and today we will talk about a tool on preventing identity theft for vulnerable communities. Different questions about scams. Yeah, I think it seems to me like it's slowed down, but those days of the car warranty calls, right? Earlier in the pandemic, the Bureau had some information about pandemic-related scams, whether it was related to stimulus payments or COVID tests, identity theft for folks who are incarcerated, absolutely. Identity theft, understanding industry marketing materials. Yeah, so even if it's not necessarily a bad actor, just being able to navigate the marketplace effectively. There's a lot of information and it can be overwhelming. Okay, so we are going to get started by talking about medical debt. And to get us started, Samantha is actually going to share a video for us on the Bureau's work around medical debt.
For millions of American families, a medical emergency can become a financial crisis. After receiving care, you may find yourself sorting through piles of bills and insurance statements from different providers. Did you already pay this bill? Did your insurance company? Do you even owe it at all? CFPB research shows mistakes in medical billing are common. If errors occur with bills and payments, it's often difficult for patients to work with providers and insurance to get them corrected and resolved. When you call for help, you get stuck in an endless loop of conversations with different providers and insurance. If bills go unpaid, providers may use third-party debt collectors to attempt to collect. Some may threaten legal action if you are unable to pay. Not all of them will be willing or able to help you understand what the debt is for, if you owe it, or if you qualify for payment assistance. Aggressive debt collectors might try to use the credit reporting system to coerce you to pay up, whether or not you even owe the money. When medical bills are reported this way, it can hurt your credit score. That can make it even harder for you to get new credit, pay the medical bills you do owe, or even find a new job. And even if you are able to dispute an inaccurate debt on your credit report, those debts might reappear. The CFPB is working to stop unfair and coercive debt collection and credit reporting practices that add to the strain on American families. To learn more about the CFPB's work on medical debt, visit consumerfinance.gov/medical debt.
All right. Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Samantha. And we are actually going to go to the website and explore that together. I put the link in the chat. We have a tool in the toolkit. It's a handout on avoiding medical debt, but there's been some recent changes. And so we wanted to show you what's on the website. So first we see an infographic that helps somebody navigate medical debt. But today we're going to look at some of the blog posts. So the first thing is if someone's getting help with the medical bills that they're entitled to. And so this provides information about charity care. So this comes up a lot, and under the Affordable Care Act, nonprofit hospitals are required to offer financial help to people who can't afford their medical care. And so this provides 5 different steps. So first, the person wants to ask for a copy of the hospital's financial assistance policy up front. By law, they have to be provided the policy, and it must explain how to apply for help. They need to fill out the application form if required. Some places don't require a separate form, and be ready to provide information about their income, like last year's tax returns, pay stubs, expenses, including rent, utilities, credit card, and any other debts. They should ask the provider how long the process takes and what happens with their bill in the meantime, and notify any debt collectors that they're seeking financial assistance for the bill and tell them to pause collections while that process plays out if it's already been reported on a person's credit and show that the bill is disputed. And then they should follow up as necessary. So this also then provides information about their rights if they're dealing with debt collectors and how to submit a complaint online. An important thing to note is that the way medical debt shows up on credit reports recently changed. So as of July 1st, 2022, the 3 national credit reporting companies, Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion, all released a joint statement. And so now medical bills will have to remain unpaid for 12 months prior to showing up on a credit report. And additionally, starting in July of 2023, so a little bit in the future, they will not include information on medical bills in collections for $500 or less when that information is provided to them. So just wanted to note that recent change. And now we want to look at the No Surprises Act. So this is also a recent change. So this started January 1st of 2022. So it's designed to protect people from unexpected medical bills. And there's some information about how to submit a complaint online to the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services if you have issues. There's some information, some Q&A here about debt collection and information to feel more confident. But basically, if somebody isn't using insurance, they're entitled to a good faith estimate. And if when they get their bill, it's more than $400 different, they can engage in a resolution process between providers and consumers. So that hopefully will help people be more prepared. And if you click on view all blog posts on medical debt, you can see some more consumer designed information about knowing your rights and protections when it comes to medical debt collections. We can see that this is available in many languages. Information about charity care that we already went over, again, available in many languages. And then information about the No Surprises Act that's meant to be more consumer friendly. So if you have any questions on medical debt, or if there's anything that's come up recently that you've seen in your work, tell us in the chat. And I wanted to check in and see, Jill, anything to add on medical debt?
Now, just to mention that we would be very interested to hear if you end up using these resources. Are they valuable to you? How often do you hear about this? Any feedback as you use these resources would be of great interest, and we're happy to respond to any questions that come up.
Great, thanks so much.
And just another, note that if you see violations of any of these policies, please do get in touch with us, in addition to the complaints function, let us know, because the Bureau is doing a lot of work on this topic currently. Thanks, Cassie.
Yeah, thank you. The director of the CFPB, Director Chopra, just held a roundtable on debt specifically related to nursing homes, and it was really interesting. I didn't know a lot of the special provisions, and so there's definitely an interest in protecting consumers in the marketplace, especially when maybe debt collectors are going after family members who aren't actually the consumer. So that was really interesting, and you can always sign up for the email listserv to get information about events like that, or the Bureau is fairly active on LinkedIn and Twitter to share information about those roundtables. Okay, so we've talked about medical debt, and we just briefly wanted to touch on student loans, which we know is a hot topic right now. So you'll see in the top right in the toolkit that there's information for those who are struggling with repaying their student loans. So it really walks somebody through, they're struggling to keep up, and then options if they have federal or private student loans, all the way through struggling to keep up with the loan is already in default. You'll see on the screen the link to studentaid.gov, and that really is the best place to go right now, especially with information about public service and the limited waiver on forgiveness. The Bureau colleagues in the CFPB Office of Students and FinEx did a joint webinar recently on the waiver that is available online if you'd like to watch the recording. And it's also the best place to get up-to-date information on forgiveness. So just to highlight, to definitely go to the Department of Education Federal Student Aid website, and to know that if somebody doesn't know what private loans they have, the best way to get that is through looking at their credit report. There's also, in addition to this tool in the toolkit, an online resource available on the website on paying for college. And this really helps somebody understand their financial aid offer. So it helps a person make a plan to pay for financial aid, or for the cost that financial aid doesn't cover. And then there's also information on repaying loans on that site, which can help somebody investigate their options for a specific situation, including different repayment plans. And that can be helpful if somebody's thinking longer term about their cost of borrowing for college. Plus, there's information on graduation rates, so somebody can make sure the institution they're selecting will meet their needs, applying for federal loans and the FAFSA, GI benefits, and student banking. So this is really a comprehensive hub, whether somebody's already in college, already graduated, or thinking about the economic costs of college. So that's a tool there. Any questions on student loans or things that are coming up? I know it's a very hot topic in the news and that things are rapidly changing. So curious to hear what you're hearing. So tell us about that in the chat. And our last topic before we go into identity theft and protecting your money more generally is on a different financial product, which is prepaid cards. So in the toolkit, there is a handout on knowing your prepaid card rights. And what it really stresses is just that the person will have the most protection if they register their prepaid card. So that could be any type of prepaid card, including payroll cards or certain government benefits. So usually each state or county selects a different vendor. So it's really important that they look at their prepaid card agreement to understand what type of card it is. And it's just important to note that if somebody registers their card, a person generally can't be held responsible for unauthorized charges or errors. And so that really adds a layer of protection for consumers who are using prepaid cards. And then again, depending on the cards, it's really important to look back to that card agreement. They may also have some protections in case of unauthorized theft or loss. So it's important to check those specific terms and conditions. So we wanted to play another short video. So Samantha is going to help us further explore prepaid card protections.
Prepaid accounts are one of the newer ways to store and spend your money. These accounts include prepaid cards that you buy in stores or the digital wallet accounts that you get online. Prepaid cards can look and act like debit cards. Now, a new rule from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau will make sure prepaid cards are safe to use like debit cards. Under the new rule, you'll be able to easily monitor your account for free, and your money will generally be protected. If your card is lost, stolen, or wrongly charged. You will also get clear, upfront information about account fees so you can know before you owe and shop for the best deal. Learn more at cfpb.gov/prepaid-rule.
Great. Thanks so much, Samantha. And I see a question on if registering and activating the card is different, or is it the same process or different? And it really is just going to depend on that card, which is why it's so important to be able to read that cardholder agreement. You know, some cards you can activate with your first purchase or by text or online, but maybe registering online is a different process and setting up for an account almost like online banking. So it just really varies from card to card. And that's why it can be a little complex to navigate prepaid cards in general. But not unlike just how different debit cards have different systems and ways to use them. So that's just another video that you can share with folks. That one's really short. It's only about a minute. But hopefully that was some helpful information on medical debt, student loans, and prepaid cards. And now I'm going to turn it over to Jill, who's going to share with us on spotting red flags and identity theft. And I will bring back up the presentation for you, Jill.
Great. Thanks, Cassie. And just one note to respond to a few of the comments we've seen in the chat. We saw a lot of interest in scams. And there is a new Bureau webpage on scams that we will pull up after these tools. I think it's a good resource. But first, we wanted to highlight the pre-packaged Your Money, Your Goals tools that cover a range of issues related to financial harm. So if you look in the toolkit, Module 9 focuses on protecting your money. And Cassie, I'm wondering if you could make that larger again. It was showing up a little larger before on my screen, at least. I'm not sure if that was, there we go. Great, thanks so much. So in Module 9, there are tools in the toolkit and then individual downloadable handouts and tools. They cover both preventing financial harm and responding to financial harm. And so often we hear about these issues after the harm has been done. And it's often hard to work into training events or work with clients encouraging people to take action before it occurs. What can people do to really take some control and prevent situations that could damage them financially down the road? So in a moment, I'll cover a couple handouts on spotting red flags and protecting your identity. But could we go to the next slide, please, Cassie? Just a reminder, if financial harm has occurred or laws or rules have been violated, if you see something that is just not working correctly in the financial system, a reminder about the Bureau's complaint function. So whether it's related to some, scams or identity theft, that we'll talk more about identity theft, but other concerns around financial harm can be directed to the Bureau at the consumerfinance.gov/complaint webpage. Submitting online is very fast. It's usually less than 10 minutes. There are a lot of automated boxes, and you can put in a brief description of the situation. If a consumer can't submit online, you can submit over the phone, which takes a little bit longer. And as a reminder, practitioners or others, anyone can submit on behalf of someone else. It's slightly more complicated, but can be done. So don't hesitate to contact us if you have questions about that as well. And over 180 languages are available, and resources for hearing impaired and deaf consumers as well. Could we go on to the next slide? And we're certainly happy to answer any questions about the complaint function along the way. I know we've covered that previously. So next, wanted to highlight a handout on spotting red flags. This is in the toolkit and downloadable as well. And this, if you are conducting training activities, this can be a nice interactive kind of light moment to engage people in a different way. What red flags have you seen is a question Cassie posed in the chat. So when we're buying a large purchase, like buying a car, negotiating for a cell phone plan, a wide range of purchases, many of us have run across pressure tactics, confusion about language, lack of clarity about what is really going to be put in writing. So the handout helps people walk through and be confident in responding if they see these red flags or pressure sales tactics. So this can be a good resource if you're working with someone who's about to make a major purchase like a car or a large expense. This can help them to keep an eye out for what to avoid. It can be especially comfortable in communities where consumers may feel less confident going to negotiate with a salesperson for a variety of reasons or barriers. So this can help them really prepare to think through what are some obstacles they might run into, how can they respond if this happens in their experience. And so we're seeing a couple comments about seeing these types of red flags in WeFinance locations. Others mentioned ads for bad credit or no credit, no problem. So kind of focusing on people who may not feel like they have all the options available to them and may feel more limited in how much they can negotiate. Others mentioned bait and switch tactics. So in some of the training sessions, what we've done is have had people act out a skit and sort of perform an example of someone buying a car or making a purchase, and have some people in the audience observing the skit and then kind of noting the red flags that come up. So this can be a good way to cover the topic in a fun way and get people engaged, and still cover an important topic to help people prevent harm. And a note about time limits, saying you have to apply within the hour, or discounts are only good. Some renovations, I was speaking with a contractor and they said, we can guarantee this price, but you have to do it within a week. And it felt like a big decision to make in a short time, but it was a really substantial discount. So how much is that really available, or how much can people extend those discounts? Other examples are roof repair and door-to-door sales. So let's move on to the next handout. And this tool is actually coming from one of the booklets. So looking at identity theft and fraud. And this is a really big concern. We hear, so many examples. I'm curious in the chat to hear about is this an issue you've seen or in your community or with people you're training or serving? Has this been an issue, identity theft? So this tool in the credit booklet helps people figure out what to do if they've been a victim of identity theft. And one of the kind of starter prompt questions is, do you think someone has your information or has tried to use it? This tool will help you walk through with someone, what you need to do to recover from that identity theft or fraud, help, find the resources, know where to go to report those concerns. And then if we go on to the next page, this is a detailed checklist with actions to take. So here it's important to keep in mind that the Federal Trade Commission is a key resource related to handling identity theft. And you'll see the important link to report fraud to identitytheft.gov. So with this tool, you can help walk someone through the steps to take. So first, making sure to call the companies and understand where the fraud or identity theft occurred. So looking at, tracking down account numbers and making sure they have the right login information, explain what happened, ask, you may want to change passwords or PIN. Just think about the steps to walk through immediately when that fraud has occurred or you suspect that fraud has occurred. Then there's a process of walking through, with the Federal Trade Commission and reporting it to the appropriate authorities. So tracking down the type of information, address, account numbers, any information that you have related to the person who stole the identity, and then keeping a list of actions you've already taken. So making sure to take good notes to be able to refer to report to all authorities. And in some cases, in many cases, there may need to be a police report. That's not always the case, but depending on the situation, this will help walk through the steps. And then finally, there's a section on placing a fraud alert on your credit report. So helping to protect your credit, notify the credit agencies of what has happened. And then there are some additional tools in the set of resources in the toolkit and downloadable tools on describing the differences between a freeze or more extensive protections to protect your credit in the long term. So there are some immediate steps people can take if they think something has occurred or to stop it immediately. And then if they want an extended fraud alert, they can go through a more long-term process. So these tools, again, in the credit booklet, we hope will be helpful on that. And I don't see a lot of comments in the chat on identity theft, but we know this is a really common concern. And I will turn back, unless we see any additional comments or questions, happy to turn back to Cassie. And again, just to mention, if complaints come into the Bureau and that's not in our areas of jurisdiction, we refer them on to the FTC. So it's important for people to know there's really no wrong door when it comes to the federal regulatory agencies. State attorneys general may also help in these cases, but I think the important piece is start taking action one place and we or others can help refer to the best place to take action. So Cassie, do you want to cover the next tools and then we'll go back and show some additional resources on scams?
Yeah. So this came up, some of you mentioned with vulnerable communities, financial abuse and exploitation or fraud that might be more targeted. And so focus on people with disabilities as this tool on identifying financial abuse and exploitation. I also just wanted to mention that the Focus on Native Communities toolkit has a tool specific to preventing financial exploitation for elders. So if that's something that you're interested in, you can definitely check that out. But here we just look for signs. So what's suspected, observed, and reported. So unusual transactions. The individual transfers the title of their home or other assets to someone else for no apparent reason. Frequent checks are made out to cash from the individual's account. There's unusual bank or credit card account or activity and statements from the financial institution. Large unexplained loan or reverse mortgage. Charges are made that will that are unexplainable. Changes to the individual's will, are made that are unexplainable, that don't make a lot of sense. Then we also, if you look on the second page of the tool, there's information on a changed environment. So bills go unpaid or overdue when someone else has been in charge of paying for the individual. Living conditions are below expectations in despite of financial resources. Their belongings like important papers or credit cards or identification documents have gone missing. And then it moves on to unusual behavior. So caregivers or family members caring for the individual seem to isolate them from other family members, friends, community events, or gathering. The individual seems fearful or becomes reluctant to talk about topics that were once routine in conversation. The individual doesn't know how much income they receive, and the caregiver is not willing to share that information when asked. So that lack of transparency can be a big red flag. The caregiver receives an unusual level of expensive or frequent gifts paid for by financial resources from the individual. And a live-in caregiver does not leave when requested. So not allowing that space for some private conversations to take place. So this tool, suspected, observed, or reported, and then some ideas on next steps to take. So I'm going to turn it back over to Jill, and I will pull up the Scams Hub, and then we'll get to our guest speaker.
Great. And I'm thinking, because it's always a highlight, while you pull that up, Cassie, I would love to shift over to our guest speaker. I certainly always enjoy these, and it's so helpful to hear what others are doing across the country, how these materials are used, and share tips and experiences. So today we really appreciate and are excited to have join us Jesse Ketterman, who is an extension educator for University of Maryland Extension, and he is part of the Western Maryland cluster, a neighbor of ours. Jesse, would you, we'll put you on spotlight and ask you to share a little bit about your experiences using the materials and working on financial empowerment tools.
All right. Well, thank you for the invitation, especially Casey, Jill, and Laura. All of you, I know we're involved in the invitation there. So again, thank you. And I'm just going to do this, I think, more as a show and tell. And one thing I would say is the Your Money, Your Goals resources are almost the next best thing to sliced bread. So some of you that are older would know that saying, but in my work and extension, these things have been wonderful and very useful in the audiences I serve. And so first I figured I would do this in a show and tell method because I have a bookshelf full of Your Money, Your Goals and CFPB materials. And so it's handy. Again, all these resources that we've mentioned in the other workshops are free. You can, put an order in, and you just got to wait. Sometimes it takes 6 weeks to get them, but they'll be there. So of course, the first thing is the Financial Empowerment Toolkit. Several copies of this. I actually have a box full of them. And in Maryland, I started an extension in 2016, and around the same time, we started offering the Your Money, Your Goals workshops. It was a 6-hour workshop, and we targeted those human service providers. We offered social work CEUs for those that participated. and from then forward, we offered about 3 or 4 times a year in Maryland, and we went from the west coast of Maryland to the east coast of Maryland. Right, I've been in Garrett County, which is our westernmost county, and facilitated the workshop, and I've been as far as Ocean City, Maryland. That's our east coast side of Maryland, and facilitated those workshops, and always get positive feedback, and they appreciate the tools that are there in the toolkit. Typically it's been 6 hours. I've done it as short as 2 hours. Really, as long as I can introduce them to the toolkit and how it works and how it's the organization of it, they can run with it from there. Let's see some of the materials in. Oh, I was going to test Casey to see if she could like post in the chat box each of these materials that I refer to, because I know she's pretty good at posting stuff into the chat box. So I thought I'd call her out there to see if she could keep up with me. Also use the tools in the toolkit. So here's SMART goals. And I tell you what, it's interesting. I prior to my career in extension, I worked in student affairs at Frostburg State University, and I taught the Introduction to Higher Education class, and we always focused on students setting goals. And even still today, I go back to Frostburg and teach some finance with those orientation students. But the worksheet that is in the Your Money, Your Goals toolkit is the best worksheet to set goals. The SMART goals worksheet there, I tried to create my own, and then this came out and I was like, I don't even need to work on mine anymore. This thing is wonderful. We also use the credit report review checklist. And I know this was shared in one of the other sessions. We've created our kind of own in-house credit, understanding credit and credit reports. And so that is a component that we share in that workshop that we've created around that. We also use the debt to income calculator worksheet. So another great tool. And probably, I forget when these came out, and maybe it was mentioned in one of the other workshops, but here are the booklets, right? I've got 2 of the booklets. I've got other ones. They're still on my shelf, but I just grabbed 2 of them. There's Debt Getting in Your Way and Behind on Bills. And these things have been wonderful. So, every now and then as an extension educator, or maybe the library will call you and say, hey, can you do a workshop? And I just have these booklets, and I can just run a workshop with the booklet itself, right? Everything that I need to cover bills can be pulled from this particular booklet. Now, the other thing I've done with all of these materials is if I'm asked to set up a table at an event, there they are. The booklets are sitting there. Some of the worksheets will be sitting there, but they've been easy because, again, I have a bookshelf of them. When my pile gets low, I order more. But at the fair this year, again, those materials were there. People could pick them up and use them and take them with them. And so they've been great. And I've got, now these aren't really under the Your Money, Your Goals umbrella, but Preventing Elder Financial Abuse is another booklet that I have on my bookshelf here. And Money Smart for Older Adults, which is a combined effort by CFPB and FDIC. And I go visit senior centers and just hand out those materials, talk to them about financial exploitation, fraud, some of the topics that we talked about today, but great resources in those materials. And so the other thing that we talked about the email list yesterday that people could sign up for, but I've also taken those lists and just published them on social media, because it's good material for the people in my cluster. And so I forward them to the people that kind of coordinate the social media in Western Maryland and say, hey, can you post this? And we're sharing the resources then that are being sent out via email as well. So that's kind of the overview of how we've used those materials in Maryland.
Great. Thank you so much, Jesse. I have to say it's really refreshing and exciting to see you hold up those materials and see how they are physically out there in the world, especially after, after doing so much on Zoom these days. I was struck by a couple of your comments. One was just that we often do hear that the SMART goals worksheet is one of the most more popular tools. And I think it's fascinating to hear, we certainly spend so much time looking at the detailed technical financial content, but in the end, so much of it comes back to really helping people link it to their own very clear personal goals and really link the steps back to setting clear goals and linking that process together. So I'm really intrigued by that and curious if you have any other good examples of how, people respond to the tool, or any other good stories about how you've seen that used.
Well, and one of the places that I use it, as I mentioned, is so I used to teach that orientation class. That's that first semester class that college students take to kind of get oriented to college. And when I used to teach the course, we always talked about goals that students would have for the semester and while they're in college and those types of things. Now, when I come in, it's usually later in the semester, and I say, I know your instructor talked about goals, but you also need to think about your financial goals. But the tool I'm about to give you can be used for both, right? The toolkit, the worksheet in the toolkit, actually, again, you can apply that to other aspects of your life, not just for your finances. So it's a great, again, it uses the SMART goal concept: specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, time oriented. And again, it walks through action steps that you need to take. I always, when I talk about SMART goals, I always talk about, hey, if somebody wants to get to Western Maryland, what are you going to do? Because people don't know how to get to Frostburg. And they finally, after some nudging, they'll say, well, I'll put it in my phone or my GPS. And I said, that's exactly what a SMART goal is. There's step-by-step instructions of how you get from one location to another. Yeah.
That is great. Thanks for sharing that. And I'm really also intrigued by the point you mentioned about helping social workers get their CEUs. And I think we're seeing more and more of that, of different partners and organizations try to link it to a training incentive for their staff, or something that really links to that professional development. I'm curious if you want to expand a little on that experience.
Right. Yeah, that was our approach when we started offering the workshops, is we would reach out to local social service agencies and say, hey, we're going to do this workshop. We can offer CEUs. We were offering them through University of Maryland at the time. Now we've since kind of had to adapt that, and now we're working through like the local community college to offer the CEUs. But basically what you need to do in any state would be find a sponsoring agency who hosts workshops, and then say, hey, we would like this to be one of the workshops that can be offered, because there's a record keeping piece that goes along with it for those social work CEUs, or for the state agencies that offer those CEUs. And so, like I said, we've done this throughout Maryland. Just reached out to the local agencies and say, hey, do you want a workshop? And then it kind of ran from there, right? Everybody's looking for CEUs, so you would always get an audience on that. I also, more recently, there's a community action conference in Maryland. So all the community action agencies, and when I said Ocean City, when I facilitated in Ocean City, that was what I did. There was a conference, they were looking for workshops, and I said, hey, I'm more than happy to facilitate this. And so I went to the Community Action Partnership Conference and facilitated it. And again, I had representatives throughout Maryland there for that particular workshop.
Great. That's really fascinating to hear. And I would love to hear in the chat if others have experience linking their training and this content to CEUs. And one detail we've noticed is that process typically includes some sort of quiz or test at the end of the unit to get that credit. And so perhaps a topic for a future conversation or sharing information. I know we've supported some groups who are, developing a test for their CEU credits, and would love to see other examples of tests people have prepared, or share examples. I don't know if that was something that you developed, or how was that a step in obtaining those credits?
Now, more recently, when I told you I partnered with the community college to offer the CEUs, I had to send them kind of a summary of what the program is and what the objectives are, what the content that was going to be covered. And again, this was all, I'm not talking a 20-page document I had to submit. This was like a 1-page document, sending them the materials, giving them the link to the website. So they had that so that they could have it on file if they were audited by the Maryland social work organization. But it was a simple process. Now, when we were doing it through College Park, we weren't paying any additional fee. When we worked with the local community college, they had a one-time fee that we paid of, I think it was $75, but $75 to offer CEUs throughout the year. I mean, that's a pretty small cost. Now, we've always talked about, we haven't done it, do we charge for the workshops? Because a lot of times we'd offer lunch or again, just having the notebooks for the workshops, there's an expense with that. But we haven't went down that road. But I'm sure probably some of the other states may have charged a small fee just for the use of a facility, or again, the notebooks, markers, all those other things that go along with it.
Great. Well, thank you. And I see Iowa, Suzanne mentioned some trainings offering CEUs, and we will keep in touch as we, look further at that experience. And I really appreciate your time today, Jesse. Thanks for sharing those experiences. And I will, unless there are other questions coming in the chat, I will turn it back over to Cassie to highlight a couple additional resources related to scams that people mentioned earlier. So thanks again, Jesse.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
All right. Well, thanks for all those great ideas. And Jesse, I would like grade for the chat posting. I think I kept up. I got them all in there, even the elder abuse resource. It's not Your Money, Your Goals. But Jill mentioned the fraud and scams landing page. And so this was a lot of information on COVID related scams and different basics. So you'll see here elder financial exploitation, foreclosure relief. Unfortunately, we also see a lot of scams after natural disasters or things related to climate change. The Bureau sent out an email after Mississippi didn't have access to water. And so, information about money transfers and things that might come up topically. I know Florida is really in for a storm, and Puerto Rico recently as well. And so this is information about wire transfer fraud, charity scams, phishing, things like that might come up. So lots of great information there, along with Know Your Rights and these how-to guides, which are really great. So unfortunately, if somebody is the victim of a scam, the how-to guide really provides simple, 4 or 5 starting steps, as well as information on how to submit a complaint. And I just wanted to mention, related to working with an older person or somebody who has a disability, that there's information about how to find your local APS through the Elder Care Navigator or this number. So if that's a concern, and then lots of these resources link to finding your local Attorney General. So just wanted to highlight those resources. And now we wanted to chat about how to co-brand the booklets. So, sorry, we know that this is a popular topic, and if you click on download instructions, you'll get the instructions that we'll look at in just a minute, but you can see here the download file for the English versions and the Spanish versions of the booklets. And in the instructions, they have information step-by-step on how to add your logo. And this agreement is only to add to the booklets at this time. I know we're in discussion about other information, and just that the Bureau's logo can't be added to any content you create yourself. So there's some trademark information, ownership, licensing, all of that fun stuff in an agreement. But then we get to the good stuff where you can download the file, prepare your logo, and add your logo using Adobe. And then there's some placement examples. So we see here on the Behind on Bills booklet, they're suggesting that you add your logo in the lower right. And then there's information on how to print these professionally. I know certainly printing cost is a challenge. So we recently worked with an organization that did a limited run with their logo until news that they were working on financial empowerment really got around. And then from there on, they just ordered the booklets from us so that they didn't have to bear so much printing cost. So if you have a special event and you want to co-brand, or if that's something that you want to do all the time, just note that you can also supplement if costs become a concern with those resources to order on Pueblo. So Jill, anything to add about co-branding?
Yes, I will add a couple new updates, and I do want to emphasize those co-branding instructions were prepared primarily for the general public, including financial institutions, other private sector entities. And the big concern there was, and throughout with all partners, is that the Bureau does not want its logo used if the content is changed or adapted, or for example, a bank wanted to print the booklets with everything except one page in there, and we were clear that this is designed for a reason with the full set of content, so it has to be used with that same content and not adapted. But the important piece here, and especially for government partners, if it's through a government entity or other partners, the key to keep in mind is not to use the logo if you're adapting, the content. But we have, I think it's not as complicated as it looks on there with all of the details. The key pieces are, we would like to know that it's being used and how it will be used more for our tracking purposes. But there are not a lot of barriers because this is public content. So if you want to use this in a variety of ways, I would really encourage you to reach out. You can contact me directly or the Your Money, Your Goals team and describe how you want to use it. For example, in the past, we have seen some organizations just add a sticker to the cover. And depending on the quantity involved, that would be acceptable to use in modest quantities. So especially depending on who the entity is that is distributing the content. And then I do want to flag, we are just recently looking at other additional options to make it even simpler for co-branding some of those individual handouts or tools that you can easily download, the 1 to 3 page tools that are typically distributed as printouts. So there we are developing a set of single page documents for some of the most popular tools that we could share with you, and you could just insert your logo. Or if you all have a set, say, these are our top 10 tools, we'd love to add our state or county logo on them, especially if you have the capacity to make those updates. If you want to go ahead and put your logo on and then email us and say, hey, we're hoping to distribute this, do you see any concerns? We should be able to respond pretty quickly and don't see a lot of barriers there. So again, really want to emphasize, this is public content. We intend it to be used and shared. And just if you have any doubts about if the Bureau's logo is involved, reach out and connect with us, and we're happy to find ways to work that out. So I'm happy to answer any questions if there are in the chat. And if not, I know we're getting closer to time, so want to make sure to open up generally for questions about co-branding or additional topics. And as we do that, I want to give a little preview and reminder that tomorrow we will be covering resources available in Spanish and some additional Bureau multilingual resources. We know we saw a lot of interest in that topic, so we will be having a really good session highlighting some new and additional resources available in Spanish tomorrow. And I will turn it over to Cassie. Do you have a few final words? Before that, I do want to thank again the Arkansas team, Dr. Laura Hendricks, Samantha Barker, Andrea Price. It's been amazing to work with you with all this smooth technology. And I am not seeing questions coming in at the moment, but want to ask Cassie for any last thoughts before we turn it back over to Laura to wrap us up today.
Thanks so much, Jill. I just echo your thanks and also don't see any questions. If you think of anything later, please feel free to reach out by email. And we really hope you'll join tomorrow for information on those resources that are available in Spanish and also in other languages to meet the needs of multilingual communities. I know it's something that both Jill and I are really passionate about. So we're excited for tomorrow's session and our final time together.
Thanks, Cassie. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today. I'm excited about the opportunities to co-brand materials. It's a request we have from our local county agents quite often, and we'll be pursuing that. Also excited to hear more about the companion guides and the multi-language opportunities for these materials when we are back tomorrow. So again, if you think of questions later, feel free to shoot us an email, and we'll see you back tomorrow at the same time, same Zoom link.